a stay-at-home dad, watching Disney movies he never had. His daughter digs through all the VHS, crushing the classics in a princess dress. Informed like Scuttle, Kurt's got your ticket, making it real like Jiminy Cricket. Most are off the Captain Hook, but if the Tweedledum, he'll be taking more shots than Bambi's mom. Leaves him raised like Simba, or cracked like the beach dishes. He'll show you a whole new world, you won't need 3 wishes. Stay at home, Disney Dad.
It's the summer of love. I'm going to hammer out all the Herbie collection, the entire Herbie collection over July and August. So we press play on the tape that started it all. It's the Love Bug, ad for the Love Bug collection. Okay, I should start that Herbie has had no value to me my entire life until last year. Last year, we had to keep pushing our Disney World trip back and back as COVID restrictions dragged on and international travel restrictions dragged on. And in July 2021, we pushed it back another 4 months to mid-November 2021. And by September, there were no signs of anything being lifted. And we were starting to discuss pushing the trip back into 2022. But then on a 90-minute drive to a small town where we were buying a new car from a dealership, we got lost. We ended up behind this small mall in a parking lot that only had one other car in it, and it was Herbie. And I got super inspired, and I was like, this is a sign, everyone. Let's keep it in November. And we ended up going during the 3 weeks where they finally opened up international travel, and before Omicron was a thing. And despite the safety measures and paying $700 US for tests to fly home, it was by far the best Disney World trip we ever had. So yeah, warm memories of that day to find Herbie when we were about to give up on our Disney World dreams. Okay, Herbie the Love Bug 1968. We start with a bunch of cars going crazy, crisscross, applesauce. Disney presents The Love Bug, starring Dean Jones, Michelle Lee, David Thommelson, that sounds familiar, and Buddy Hackett. So is this a smash-up derby? Is this how they start? I've never been. Cars finally start hitting each other. The song intro reminds me of the opening to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so thumbs up to that. The music ends when a car gets hit and flips upside down and Super Dave crawls out. Next scene, we're driving in a convertible down the street, but actually in front of a green screen while people shake the car, you know. Some guy is getting berated by his driver. All these drivers these days are 18, 19, you're too old to keep doing these smash-up derbies. He drops this guy off and he meets some welder bumbler, and he gives him part of his bumper from the car that got smashed up. And even this welder is like, you gotta stop doing these races, you're gonna die, buddy. Then the welder tells him the story about how he found himself, and the driver's like, hey, I don't have to go to Tibet to find myself. I know what I want to do, what I've always wanted to. I want to drive, I want to race. So now he's walking down the street and he passes by this giant sign in a storeroom window that says, may we direct your attention to these? And underneath the sign there's a pair of female legs, and all like the blood leaves his head, and he walks right into the store, like the glass, and bonk! So the woman attached to those legs comes running out and apologizes to him for being so stupid. He walked into glass, and inside this place is actually a car dealership, and he's drooling over all these nice cars. The male salesperson appears and dismisses the girl because it's time for the men to talk shop, and it's the guy from Bedknobs and Broomsticks. He's like, what's your total amount you want to spend today? And the main dude, whose name is Jim Douglas, goes, $75. Bedknobs guffaws and storms off, but as he's leaving, he sees this horribly offensive white buggy in the middle of his showroom. I guess someone's wanted the buggy and then returned it, and now it's in the middle of his showroom, and Bedknobs is irate that this junker is in his showroom with his expensive cars, and he starts kicking it, and Jim Douglas is like, stop that! So in this movie, the car is the damsel in distress. As Jim Douglas leaves the store to catch the trolley, the bug comes to life because he's smitten, because Jim stood up for him. So he follows him home, and the Scooby-Doo Charlie the Robot music is playing. In the morning, the car is parked outside Jim Douglas's apartment, and now he's being charged for Grand Theft Auto. He's like in old-timey acting. Now, how did that car get here? And the policeman's like, I share your curiosity. Great line. Back at the dealership, Bedknobs is like, I didn't leave it outside your house, and I would not do business with someone of your social, or someone who's not socially comparable with me. Screaming back and forth, Bedknobs won't press charges if Douglas just buys the cars. They're drawing up the papers. Herbie pees oil on Bedknobs' leg. He's driving Herbie around the city, and then suddenly Herbie goes nuts, and the car has a mind of its own, and another driver on the road gets cut off, And he goes, "What's the matter? You from LA or something?" "Yeah, take that, LA. Herbie's coming for you." Herbie drives itself back to the dealership, and the two men are at it again after Herbie rear ends Bedknobs' Rolls Royce over and over and over. Jim Douglas accuses Bedknobs of selling him a joke car. Then the girl with the legs, whose name is Bennett, wants to take the car for a ride to see for herself. So Jim goes with her. And I should mention Bennett's beehive, absolutely on point. Bennett begins woman-splaining new cars to Jim, but then she realizes, hey, this is racer Jim Douglas, and she reads him a list of racing failures from just off the top of her head. I'm sure he loved that, because I guess he sucks these days. Some hippies pull up and want to race at the red light, and Herbie goes nuts and blows the hippies away. Bennett's like, "Was that one of your showboating tricks?" Herbie spins back around and tries to legit kill Bedknobs. Like, this guy has to jump out of the way of a speeding automobile, and are we just gonna ignore that Herbie actually tried to kill a man right here? Herbie takes Jim Douglas and Bennett to a drive-in restaurant. Like, he's trying to hook Jim Douglas up with this girl, so he locks the doors and she can't get out, and she's screaming that she's a prisoner of Jim Douglas, and then he just starts ordering burgers for them like this is all normal. See, Herbie is trying to get Douglas some action, and while this was probably kind of funny and charming in 1968, it's pretty rapey by 2022 standards. After burgers, all is good. I imagine the director was explaining this in 1968 as, "See, Toots here is just being irrational because she's hungry. You know how women get." Jim Douglas lets her drive Herbie again. Now Herbie goes nuts, so Bennett knows Jim Douglas isn't a crazy serial killer and the car is possessed. Herbie takes them to a makeout place, and Bennett's still behind the wheel, and Jim Douglas is like, "Man, I wish we could have got to know each other better before you took me here." And she's all flustered. I didn't take you here, it was the car." This is good stuff, pal. Now the car won't start. So it finally does start, but Bennett's mad and she gets out and she's walking home. A police officer sees this and watching Jim chase Bennett, and there's an empty car following them. He gets out of his car and he's like, "Is that your car chasing you?" "Why, yes it is." The cop says, "Not too smart wandering around the park at night." "Okay." Then this bumbler cop forgot to put his own cop car into park and rolls into the pond and then ducks are in it. Wah, wah. The mechanic welder Art Bumbler friend is telling Jim Douglas more about his trip where he found himself. When Jim tells him about Herbie coming to life, he tells Jim, "I knew it was going to happen." Quote, "We take machines and we fill them with information until they are smarter than we are." Jim picks up some flowers and drops them off with Bennett at her work. Then he tells his enlightened sidekick, welder Bumbler, that he's ready to race again. They slap a 53 on Herbie and they're off. The car crushes it and wins races, and now Bedknobs wants to buy the car back. Bennett's weaving a web. She mentions that Bedknobs is in the race with his own car at the end of the month, and she says Douglas will race, and if he beats you, Bedknobs, how about Jim Douglas's little bug is paid off? Apparently, he's still making monthly car payments to Bedknobs when he forced him to buy the Herbie. Now, if Bedknobs wins, he gets the car back. Now, after a go-nowhere speech, Jim Douglas agrees. They race. Herbie's losing, but towards the end of the race, his sidekick welder buddy does this. And I wish I had him in my life cheering me on like this constantly. Herbie sees the sign, and he's like demon-possessed. His possession kicks in, I guess, and Herbie passes Bedknobs' car, squirts oil on him, and wins the race. Bedknobs is furious and demands to have the car inspected, and Herbie pees oil on him for like the 5th time. Montage of Herbie kicking ass and winning more races and advancing in the standings. Douglas wins a race and mouth kisses some model in a sash that's holding the trophy for the news cameras. Oh, 1968, what a time. More racing, more wins for Douglas, and more losses for Bedknobs. Bedknobs is losing his mind and starts to act really creepy around Bennett, and then the phone rings and it's Douglas making a date with Bennett. Bedknobs is like, yes, bed him and learn his secrets for me. Bedknobs has given Bennett their special car to take Douglas out on the date, and she pulls up in this yellow show car, sorry, not a car guy. After they leave, Bedknobs goes to the garage, and he's needling the Zen mechanic welder Bumbler guy who's channeling Moe from the Three Stooges. Bedknobs plays this simpleton like a fiddle, and when he runs off to make him a drink, Bedknobs starts looking around Herbie for some sort of witchcraft, I guess. Meanwhile, on the date, Bennett pulls over and lets Jim drive the fancy car. He tells Bennett, "You know what I said to myself the first time I saw you? I said to myself, now, there's a real lady." No, you didn't. You thought and he tells her he likes his car better because without a good car, he's only half a man. All right, bud. Issues starting to burst through these cracks here. Back at the garage as the Bumbler makes more coffee, Bedknobs pours sugar or whipped cream in Herbie's gas tank. The date ends and Bennett and Jim Douglas flirt with car lingo, and I can't tell if they're sexually attracted to each other or to cars. And then they focus and share a kiss. Back at the garage, the bumbler is drunk and he asks Bedknobs, you want to know the secret of this little car? Bedknobs gets out his pad and paper and leans forward and goes, yes, yes, yes. And he goes, it's heart. That's good. Even I fell for that. It's the next race and Bedknobs is cheery and confident because he sabotaged Herbie, right? The race starts and Herbie's winning. Did he just win? Oh no, Herbie is about to win, but then he spins and sputters because he's full of sugar or whatever. Herbie makes uncomfortable, upset stomach noises. Gross. 53 is fading faster after developing a problem of some kind, says the announcer. Bedknobs finally wins this race and is posing with the trophy along with a pretty girl in the sash that poses with the winner, but he shoos her away because he doesn't want to share the spotlight. That was really funny. I'll bet the actor just added that himself because this guy is such a pro at being a heel and being hated. Bennett comes to see Herbie, knowing Bedknobs sabotaged the car. She pops the hood and wants to help. Oh, this bumbler isn't even a mechanic at all. He says, I'm not a mechanic, but I know the little car is suffering. She's like, give me those overalls. And some chubby man's overalls fits this slim lady just fine. It's like the sisterhood of pants or whatever. Scene flip, and she has fixed Herbie. I hope the bumbler welder misread the tone of the room and like leans in for a kiss or something. But then she says, I'll bet Adam thought woman was a pretty unique piece of equipment when he met Eve. What? Anyway, where's Jim Douglas and all this? He pulls up at home with his new Lamborghini he's going to race. Tennessee is the bumbler welder's name. Jim Douglas says, the El Dorado race is coming up and I need a real car. Tennessee's like, shh, Herbie's going to hear you. Bedknobs calls Jim and Jim says, you deserve to have your brains kicked out. Bedknobs now offers Jim $1,500 for Herbie and he's like, sure, come get it. Tennessee loses his mind. He calls Jim a crumb. He tells Bennett to tell it like it is. Out in the real world, she's like, hey, I get rid of one heel in exchange for another. You shouldn't do that to Herbie. Jim looks at Bennett and is like, has everyone lost their minds? I can understand Tennessee. He just came here off a flying saucer, but you, lady. That's a really funny line. He goes harder into her and is like, what are you even doing here? She replies, I don't even know. I don't even know. And the acting wheels are coming off of Herbie the love bug. He accuses her of coming over last night to distract him while her boss sabotaged his ride. She's like, you think it's really you winning these races? It's not you, it's Herbie. Which is the line I'm going to use when I break up with girls from now on. It's not you, it's Herbie. They hear a banging and Jim tells Tennessee to knock it off, and Tennessee's standing beside him. It's not me, it's Herbie. They run outside and Herbie's beating the shit out of the new Lamborghini he bought to race. Yeah, yes, this is what I want. Herbie's awesome. Kill that Herbie. Blood, you want it, you need it. Bedknobs shows up with cash in hand and Jim's like, $2,000 for the love bug now? You believe this nonsense too? Tennessee says, doesn't matter if you believe in Herbie. He don't believe in you no more. And they look up and Herbie has ran away from home while mom and dad were fighting. This movie is confusing and awesome. Now it's a race to find Herbie so Herbie can race. Bedknobs finds Herbie first and gets him into a garage and is like, all right, man, tear it apart. Let's see what makes this thing tick. And Herbie freaks out and the Scooby-Doo Charlie the Robot music plays. Bloop, beep, 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 and it panics and bursts through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man and escapes. Herbie hides under a float in this like Chinese parade. Jim finds the bug and chases it. They're doing a great job of giving this inanimate object some personality and making it sympathetic. I love all of this. Jim gives up and he's pouting on a foggy dock, and then he sees Herbie sadly drive by and he's heading for the bridge. Jim chases it and Herbie is on the Herbie is gonna kill himself. Jesus Christ, Herbie is gonna commit suicide? Herbie's trying to jump off the bridge and end it all. Jim tries to rock him back onto the bridge and pleads him not to do it, and Herbie's trying to kill himself, but he lands safely on the bridge. Jim saved his life. A scene from before that I didn't mention because I didn't think it was important was when Herbie broke out of Bedknobs' garage. He destroyed like this Chinese fish market. Now the fish market owner, Mr. Wu, is going through the impounded cars. He finds Herbie and he says, that's the one. Now Jim has to pay for the fish market damages before he can get his car back, but he doesn't have any money. So Tennessee, who spent time on a mountain in Tibet teaching English to, quote, some of them, asks to speak to the Chinese gentleman in private. He talks him into dropping the charges, but now Mr. Wu wants to keep Herbie for himself, so they make a deal. He can buy Herbie now, but Jim gets to drive Herbie at the El Dorado race coming up, and if he wins, he can use that winning money to buy Herbie back from Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu, who has pretended not to understand English until now, says in clear English, now you speak my language. It's race day, El Dorado, the gold rush, it's 1968, and the announcers are already about how the good old days of racing are behind them. Wow. Now, Bedknobs is charming Mr. Wu and is telling him he's a very shrewd businessman and asks if he wants to bet on the race. The terms of our wager? What do you want? What do you got? Scene fade. For the race, Jim has Tennessee and Bennett in the car with him. Okay. I think Bedknobs had someone sabotage Herbie before the race. Again, question mark. Happy song montage of Herbie racing and passing everyone. Bedknobs' car drops oil behind it, and Herbie and all the other cars spin out and crash, but Herbie keeps going, skids across water. Herbie walks on water. There's some hijinks, and a bear ends up in a car with Bedknobs, and he overacts, and he's scared like a toddler. And like he acts like a toddler would if you told him to act scared. How long is this movie? We get a race update, and Jim Douglas has ran out of gas, and Tennessee has a suspicion about his extra gas can, and yup, it's just water. They have to, quote, pass Chinese camp. And then Chinese music starts, and suddenly a bunch of Asian men run out and basically pick up Herbie and carry him to the Chinese camp to refuel, because Uncle Wu sent them there to make sure Herbie stays in the race. There's some low-key racist moments and sound effects, and I'm just going to skip over them and jump to the midway point of the first racing day. The first day of racing? Oh, this movie must be like Mary Poppins long. I swear it's been like 2.5 hours already. Herbie and Bedknobs are racing neck and neck, and Herbie gets flipped on its roof, but is immediately racing again 2 seconds later. More Austin Powers music. Racing continues. I kind of want to go to bed. Here it is. Bedknobs does the Scooby-Doo roadside bit and turns which way the race sign is pointing, so Jim and Herbie go the wrong way. Herbie and his crew get stuck in a mine shaft, but use the elevator to get back to the road. Bedknobs nudges Herbie and his wheel comes off. Like, how many times are they going to get sabotaged and immediately catch back up to Bedknobs' car? How is that possible? Their spare tire cut into pieces by Bedknobs before the race. How did Herbie allow Bedknobs to sabotage everything about him? Isn't he alive? Herbie is now racing, tilting up on the one side that has 2 wheels. Fade to black. Day 1 of the El Dorado is over, and every car made it back except Herbie. The judges went home, leaving only Mr. Wu at the finish line who watches Herbie limp across. Tomorrow is day 2 and the final day. Okay, Herbie is dead. He can't win the race. He can't even drive, or can he? Mr. Wu says, a wise man once said, when you get to the last page, close the book. It's over. Sad music. The dream is dead. This is how Herbie ends. No, wait, Bennett gives the pep talk. Jim agrees there's something real about that little car, something that doesn't even have a name. I would disagree. How about witchcraft? Possession? Cursed? Instead of trying to fix the car and get Herbie ready for tomorrow, Jim and Bennett make out. Bedknobs shows up and wants to tow Herbie away because he's not in the race anymore. Surprise, Mr. Wu bet the car and lost, so now it belongs to Bedknobs. He's going to get it crushed and turned into a doormat so he can wipe his feet on Herbie every day. Jim tries to whoop that Bedknob ass and Herbie comes to life like Christine and chases Bedknobs. And like, I joke about the Christine comparison, but this had to be an influence for what Stephen King did. Wait, he will race again. Mr. Wu says he has to remove, quote, Egg Foo Young off his face. I don't like that. Next day, the final day of racing, Herbie is back into fighting shape, and he's ready to fight. Herbie wants to kill Bedknobs. The race is on, and Herbie's just pissed off, so he's just revved up, and they're doing the speed like times 5 instead of 3 this time as he's driving around and passing everyone. He's jumping rocks, he's taking shortcuts. I'm pretty sure this is all illegal in racing, but this is fun. Herbie's a vengeful maniac and has no to give anymore. He's smashing through street signs and bushes, and he has a thirst for Bedknobs' blood, and nothing can stop him. Bedknobs knocks Herbie off a cliff, and Jim and Tennessee and Bennett all fall out, and Herbie climbs down a tree, rights itself, pops the doors open, they all get back in and drive away, and no one cares that this car is possessed anymore. Bedknobs' next attempt to sabotage Herbie fails, and he ends up in Herbie's trunk like Bedknobs himself, which is in the front. The trunk's in the front. They hear him screaming, so they stop and they let Bedknobs out of the front. We should be seeing them at the finish line any minute of the race, says the officials. Herbie is actually tearing apart, like the car is about to break in half, but Tennessee starts welding it together while Jim is driving, and I'm not sure this would be approved by the welding safety standards. The car pulls apart like this, but keeps driving. Jim tries to stop, but Herbie won't let him. Herbie will kill everyone to beat Bedknobs in this race, and I'm all for that energy. They're neck and neck coming to the finish line. Now Herbie breaks in half, and the back half with Tennessee somehow takes the lead and crosses the finish line. Herbie wins the race. That was fun. Mr. Wu and everyone cheers. Herbie won, but at what cost? At what cost? Jim macks on Bennett, and we go to the ending. Mr. Wu buys Bedknobs' entire car dealership, and Bedknobs has been reduced to a general mechanic, where his bumbling energy continues to flow. Herbie has fixed itself again, and Herbie, by himself, just drives Jim and Bennett on their honeymoon. They're sitting in the back seat. No one's driving. Herbie's just taking them somewhere. Cool. Okay. The end. Now, you know what? Just play the extra. I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts.
That's what I think about.
What do you think?
What we have is a concern about Curtis Anderson. His interviewing style is not the best. His personal appearance is not the best. I was wondering if the man has some kind of a hold over the channel that he's allowed to be employed for so long with the standards of journalism and personal appearance that he has. Thank you.